So, here we are. Mere moments, mere hours left of the year 2020. Good riddance, is what I say. I think one thing we can all agree on is 2020 has been an absolute Beardo Benjo. If you're watching this video, that means you've made it. You survived. It's the end of 2020. Congratulations. Have yourself a drink. Relax tonight. But beware that, sadly, just because the year's ending doesn't mean the challenges, the problems, the issues that we faced throughout this year are going to change overnight. That would be pretty great. If that was the case, if I woke up tomorrow and it was clean slate and we got to start again, that would be absolutely incredible. But sadly, that's just not how it works. But I think it's still worth taking a moment to reflect and appreciate the fact that we've come through this year, regardless of how difficult, challenging and unpredictable it has been for many of us. I'm very fortunate in that I haven't had to go through probably the turmoil, the pain, and the kind of destruction that 2020 has brought upon so many. I've come out the other side fairly unscathed. It's still been a challenging year. I don't live in a particularly big house, and I've been living by the rules, so I've pretty much been within these four walls for an entire year, and that does make you go a little bit crazy. Thank God for content creation and video games, which is kind of why I'm here today making this video. But yeah, we've made it, I've made it, you've all made it, and I just wanted to make a short video at the end of the year just to say thank you to everybody who's watched any of my content, anyone who's subscribed, anyone who's liked a video, anyone who's commented, just anyone who's engaged with the things that I've been doing this year to keep me sane. It has been a roller coaster. At the start of the year, I predicted that I would be on 5,000 subs by the end of the year, or that's the benchmark that I wanted to get to. And here we are, and I'm on 18,000. So safe to say it's been a pretty good year for me in terms of content creation. And that's mainly because I haven't really worked all year. I've been furloughed from jobs, much like many people have, and I've been able to sit at home and create and spend time doing things that I've always wanted to do, passion projects. And I've dedicated a lot of time to my channel, and I've dedicated a lot of time to doing things that make me happy. And I've learned a lot this year in terms of what makes me happy, and this channel is definitely something that makes me very happy. So I wanted to come on and say thank you to everyone who's engaged with my content, and thank you to everyone who's given me the chance to build a platform whereby I can share my love of video games with you, with people who watch content and engage with that content online. So thank you. I really genuinely do appreciate it. It means the absolute world to me. The other reason I'm making this video today is not just to say thank you to all you wonderful people who watch my content, but I wanted to reflect back on all the video games I've played this year. Only briefly. I'm not going to sit here for hours and talk about every single one I've played, but I want to think back about all the best experiences I've had with video games this year, and the worst experiences I've had with video games this year, because I think that would be fun, and I will try and keep it nice and short and snappy. This year, more than ever, I think video games and video games as a culture have been a crutch to millions of people who would have really struggled through lockdowns, through isolation, through loneliness. They've helped people through this year, and more than ever, I've played so many games this year. It's absolutely insane, and partially that's because of the channel and because I've had more opportunities to play more games and to create content, but also because I've been sitting at home without necessarily a job. So I've played video games by choice, and they've kept me sane, and I think they have for many people. So I'm just going to go through very briefly now and talk about the best video games I've played this year and the worst video games I've played this year. We're going to start with the best. We'll finish up on the worst. That's kind of funnier, I think. So this is how this is going to work. I've picked 5 honourable mentions and then 5 of my very best experiences this year, and I've picked 5 dishonourable mentions and 5 of the very worst video game experiences I've had this year. Now, the honourable and dishonourable mentions, they're not the best or worst video games this year, but in one way or another, they kind of let me down or didn't live up to expectations. So they're not quite the best, they're not quite the worst, but they kind of sit in an iffy place. There were so many games I played this year that I wanted to shout out and mention so many of them, so that's what we're doing. We'll kick things off positively. We'll kick things off with the good games. Let's jump in and have a look at my honourable mentions. My first honourable mention for the year 2020 is the game Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Remake, number 1 and 2. I have so much love for that franchise. That franchise has a direct line to my nostalgia. When I played the remake, I felt like I was a little kid again. Running home from school, sitting on the edge of my bed, playing those old Tony Hawk Pro Skater games. It was a masterclass. It is a masterclass in how to do a remake. It looked gorgeous. It's stunning. They've completely overhauled the way it looks. It looks like a modern game, but it retains all the nostalgia, all the familiarity, all the instant accessibility of those original games. Plus, it has the amazing soundtrack. They didn't tinker with what made those games great. They just made it look new, made it feel fresh. And playing that in the heat of the summer, when lockdown was first kicking off, was an absolute joy, because it helped me to kind of regress a little bit and feel like a kid again. So yeah, that's why Tony Hawk's is one of my honourable mentions. Not quite one of the best games I played this year, but definitely worthy of an honourable mention. Next up is Star Wars Squadrons, a game that I had almost no expectation of. Quite literally no expectation of this game at all. And then I played it on flat screen, and I thought, hey, you know, this is kind of cool. This is kind of cool. It wasn't blowing me away, but it was pretty fun. And then I played it in VR. And oh my god, it's such a good experience sitting in the cockpit of a TIE fighter or an X-Wing or a Y-Wing, whatever you want to pilot. You can pilot pretty much everything in that game. It feels so good. It feels so rewarding, all the small details. It really felt to me anyway like a game that was built for VR, and then they shoehorned in a flat screen mode to ensure it would still sell enough copies. Usually it's the other way around, but this felt like it was built for VR, and it's a great experience. One of the best Star Wars experiences I've had recently. I still haven't got around to playing Fallen Order. I will at some point. But yeah, Star Wars Squadrons, a massive surprise and a great escapist way to enjoy some VR at the midpoint of this year. Big shout out to that game. Next up is the only game I've played on my PS5. I was really excited for the PS5 this year. It was probably the one bit of tech that I thought was going to completely blow me away, and it did. It's a great bit of kit, but my wife's played it more than me. I've actually spent more time playing the Quest 2. That's ended up being my standout bit of tech for the year, but I digress. The one thing I have played on my PS5 is one of the coolest things I've played in a long time, and that's Astro's Playroom. Astro's Playroom, the free game that comes on the PS5, is absolutely stunning. It's just joyous, and I think you'll realise as I go through this list, or these top best experience games, that a lot of these games are quite fun, because this year's been all about escapism for me anyway. And Astro really felt like a top tier platformer with some incredible technology, harnessing that amazing DualSense controller, the vibrations, the haptic feedback. It felt like playing something new. It felt like next gen to me. That's, for me anyway, what next gen is, when people innovate and give me new ways to play games and experience them. It's not just about shiny new visuals. I like to feel something different, and Astro felt like something different. It felt like a brand new experience. I really hope we get a full-fledged, long Astro game for PS5, and I hope it's soon. Best thing I've played on PS5, because it's the only thing I've played on my PS5. Next up is Ghost Runner. Everyone needs to go out and buy Ghost Runner. Ghost Runner is, and I'm going to say this, it might be controversial, but it's brave. Ghost Runner is the best Cyberpunk game that's come out in 2020. I'll say that right there. Ghost Runner feels like Mirror's Edge meets Doom with a cyberpunk aesthetic. It's so fast, it's so frantic, but the controls are so tight, so when you make a mistake, it feels like it's on you. It's not the game doing something wrong or not teaching you the mechanics right. It feels like it was just you were 1 second too slow. Not even 1 second. 1/2 of a second. 5 milliseconds. It's so tight. And the story was a little bit obtuse. It didn't really kind of engage me much, I must admit, but I didn't care because it was so fun to play. I played it through start to finish in a very short period of time because I couldn't stop playing it. It was a challenge, it was fun, it was engaging, and it's really cheap to pick up. Give Ghost Runner a try if you haven't played it already. It really is the best Cyberpunk game I've played this year. And my last honourable mention before I get to the top 5 genuinely best games I've played this year is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a game that I didn't expect to love as much as I did, a game that I actually bought as a filler game. I thought I'll play this in that strange period of time between nothing and Cyberpunk coming out, and it will kind of tide me over until Cyberpunk, and I ended up enjoying it far more than I think I've enjoyed Cyberpunk so far, bizarrely. I loved it, really loved it. Gorgeous, gorgeous open world. It felt like a complete refinement of what Ubisoft have been doing for years in terms of their open world games. They got everything right. Gorgeous open world, great characters, intriguing and interesting and diverse side quests. I never knew what I was going to kind of bump into with those side quests. Some of them were fairly routine, but the ones that involved people and stories were funny, emotional, action-packed. They covered a full range of emotion. They were really, really good. It never felt like a chore to play that game or explore that world. So yeah, best Assassin's Creed game I played in a long time. The last one I completed was Black Flag, and I tried Origins and I tried Odyssey, and I could understand that they were good games and they were on the path to becoming something that I would enjoy again. But they didn't quite hook me all the way through to the end, and then Valhalla absolutely nailed it. Not quite one of the very best of the year, but definitely deserves an honourable mention. Assassin's Creed Valhalla blew me away, smashed my expectations, best Assassin's Creed game in years. Okay, into the top 5 best games I played in 2020. Coming in at number 5, something that I'm sure no one will be surprised about, Half-Life Alyx. What a triumphant return for the Half-Life franchise. It's been a meme for longer than I can remember, you know? People talking about Half-Life 3 and Half-Life 3 confirmed, and when's it going to come out, and is it going to come out, and will it ever happen? And then out of the blue, we get this Half-Life VR experience. A full VR game that has no option for flat screen play, and at first that made me feel a little bit uneasy. I thought, oh, is that the right move? You know, there's a huge install base of Half-Life fans that want a new game, and this is catered only towards VR users. But then, me being a big VR fan, I thought, hey, that's fine, I'm going to play it. And I think what it did for VR was really show the mainstream that VR games can be incredible. They can be immersive, they can have full-length campaigns, the worlds can feel lived in, they can feel like you're actually there, the physics work, the characters are emotional. It ticked all the boxes for me, and it's left us with a massive cliffhanger, which I won't go into now, but it's left us in a place again where I cannot wait for the next Half-Life experience, and I hope Valve continue to invest in VR technology, because it's a medium that needs support, it's a medium that's growing, and Half-Life Alyx is the gold standard of VR games right now. Number 5 in terms of the best games I played this year. In at number 4, the game that I secretly hoped would win Game of the Year, but I knew it wouldn't, Animal Crossing New Horizons. I loved this game, I love this game. I think a lot of people turned their noses up at it when it was nominated for Game of the Year and thought, why would that win? That's not The Last of Us, it hasn't got the shiniest graphics or any action-packed sequences. But what Animal Crossing is perfect escapist fun. Games can be a lot of things. They can be an art form, they can be action-packed, they can be emotional, they can challenge you, but they can also just be escapist fun, and that's what Animal Crossing is. And I think this year more than ever, people needed that. Just before lockdown hit in the UK, we ran out and bought a second Switch for the house so that me and the wife could both play Animal Crossing, and we sunk an incredible amount of time into that game during those first few weeks, months of lockdown and of the pandemic. That game was a lifeline for a lot of people this year. That game was a ray of sunshine for a lot of people this year, and I am grateful for it, as I'm sure many people are. Animal Crossing, number 4, one of the best games I played this year, for very different reasons than the others, but Animal Crossing, fantastic experience. Coming in at number 3, Ghost of Tsushima, one of the best, if not the best, open world games out there. I'd probably still put Red Dead above it. Red Dead 2, that's probably my gold standard in terms of open world games, but I think Ghost of Tsushima comes very close and blows everything else out of the water. The way it took all the best bits from existing open world games and just refined them within an inch of their life made that game feel so special. It was a very natural open world experience. There wasn't HUD or garish elements kind of pulling you out of the gameplay. It was all baked within that world. It made you feel like you were there, from following birds to following petals on the wind. It just felt like a real place that I was inhabiting during my time. Yeah, it was magical, and again, it came out at a really great time when I needed escapism, and Ghost of Tsushima really kind of pulled me into its feudal Japan, and I just was able to live there for the duration of my time playing that game. I need to revisit it on PS5 because apparently it runs like an absolute dream, and I will do. Yeah, it was a magical experience. I think a lot of people wanted this to win Game of the Year. I understand why. But for me, there was a couple of experiences that personally I enjoyed a little bit more. In at number 2 is Doom Eternal. I really wanted this to win some awards. It didn't win anything. Where's all the love for Doom Eternal? In all seriousness, this was a very competitive year. There's been a lot of amazing games come out, and a lot of them I haven't even got around to playing yet. Stuff like Hades, which is meant to be absolutely mind-blowing, I haven't even played, so I can't include it on this list. But Doom Eternal for me was just the ultimate first-person shooter. I think it did everything that the original Doom 2016 did, but did it bigger and better. One of my critiques about Doom 2016 was the environments and the locations which most of the game took place in. They were a little bit boring. A lot of kind of mechanical interiors of spaceships, a lot of red, barren Mars-like planets, and Doom Eternal almost heard my inner monologue about that and thought, okay, well, we're going to set this game in so many different varied and exciting environments. Yeah, it was like snow planets, there was kind of lush green planets, there was cities that were kind of falling into lava and hellscape. That game was Doom 2016, but turned up to 11. The verticality of it all, exploring the worlds to find all the hidden secrets and unlockables. I had such a good time with Doom Eternal. It was so hard and it was so long. Each level was about an hour long, and that might be because I was getting my ass kicked, I'm not entirely sure, but the content in there's so much content, and you can tell they care about the product they're making. Just a great first-person shooter, so brutal, the music is amazing. I could gush about it all day, but yeah, just what a great time. Had a fantastic time with that. One of the best first-person experiences I've played from start to finish in a very, very long time. Doom Eternal did everything the original did and just took it up a notch. Fantastic. I'm going to need to have a swig of beer for this one, because people are going to be angry at me. In at number 1, the best game I played this year, let's just get this out of the way, was The Last of Us 2. For me personally, it has a lot of kind of sentimental value now. It's the very first game I streamed from start to finish. I streamed the entire thing, and I got to play it through blind. No one spoiled anything for me. I played it all through blind with an audience, an engaged audience who helped me enjoy that experience, and that elevated it for me. The game itself, I think, was perfect in terms of what it was trying to do. It isn't a perfect game, but it's the perfect representation of a horrible, dystopian, brutal future whereby horrible mushroom-headed zombies inhabit the world. It was a hard game to play. It was emotional, it had me thinking about the choices that were being made, it had me questioning who was right and who was wrong. It just drilled into all the right emotional beats, and I think I'll always respect it for doing something daring and making some big choices regarding some key characters that I think were beloved to many people. But those choices, to me anyway, felt valid and correct for that world. They didn't feel out of place. They didn't feel like things that wouldn't happen in that world. The storytelling was just sublime. There's a reason I think that it won Game of the Year. It's a very polished action-adventure game with a very strong but very heavy and dark story. It won't be for everyone, but for me, it was amazing. It was the best game I played this year. It left me thinking about it for weeks afterwards. I can't wait to play it again, but I'm not playing it on PS5 until they do like a kind of an updated version or an upgraded version, because it just runs the same apparently, which is rubbish. Okay, now we're getting into the worst games I've played this year. I'm not going to go hard on these games and call them all crap, because that's not fair. People have worked on these games, and for one reason or other, they just disappointed me. They didn't live up to my expectations. So it's more about me than the game, I think is what I'm trying to say here. But let's just get on with it. First up, I'll jump into my dishonourable mentions. My first dishonourable mention is a game called Second Extinction. This is a game I was very excited for. It is effectively Left 4 Dead with dinosaurs. I love Left 4 Dead and I love dinosaurs, so I expected to grab this and just immediately be enamoured and want to play over and over and over again. And it kind of was a bit meh. It was a bit meh. The dinosaurs feel kind of a bit bullet spongy, they feel a bit chaotic. The world is very pretty, but there's not a lot of variance. The maps are kind of, once you've seen the map, you know what you're getting into. There's not a lot of variance in terms of the gameplay. You just run and shoot dinosaurs, plant the occasional bomb. I expected quite a lot from this one, and it didn't quite live up to expectation. But I will say it didn't make it into the list of the worst games because I can see the potential there. I think it will grow into something very good, but right now it isn't quite the game I want it to be. It isn't quite Left 4 Dead with dinosaurs just yet, but I do think it will grow into that with time. Next up is a Xbox game, one of the only Xbox exclusives we've had this year, because they haven't had the best year, but I'm sure they'll have a better year next year. Grounded. again, was really excited for this. It looked gorgeous. I loved that kind of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids vibe. Running around in the backyard as a little shrunk down kid, exploring and having everything kind of giant sized. It was such a great concept and it looked amazing. They nailed that. The spiders in particular are terrifying. If you have arachnophobia, do not play that game. Actually, do play that game because there's a mode you can change them into these big blobs. But for me, it was the gameplay that didn't quite land. And again, it's in my dishonourable mentions because it's early access. So I understand that it can change and evolve over time, and I'm sure it will get to a point where it's much more structured and much more balanced, because at the moment it feels hard to do anything. I played with a few friends and we enjoyed it fundamentally, but it was very hard to do anything. It was very hard to progress. And once we built our little base and done the 2 or 3 story missions that were in there, it felt like there wasn't any other reason to return and play. It's one to keep an eye on, but it didn't quite hit my expectations. I did have quite high expectations. That's my problem with a lot of things. I do have quite high expectations. Next up is my biggest VR disappointment of the year, a game called Hinge. And again, like the others, this is on the dishonourable mentions because I see the potential. Hinge looks like it's trying to do something very special in VR. They're trying to get a beautiful environment that's always shifting and changing. You play in kind of a Art Deco hotel. It's a horror game, and they're aiming for extremely realistic, vibrant, volumetric lighting. They're going for kind of gorgeous visuals, but the hotel is changing and shifting around you as you move around. What that resulted in when I tried to play it was an experience that was very laggy, very high on the latency side of things, and I didn't really understand what I was supposed to be doing. It wasn't clear, and I don't need my handheld, but I would like some kind of objective. It just didn't run very well on my PC, and it was a big disappointment for me. I think if they can get some patches out and kind of put a little bit more structure in place, it could be a really creepy horror game for VR because it looks stunning. Fundamentally, the biggest issue for me with Hinge was how badly it performed. My PC's pretty good and I was getting barely any frames. It was laggy, it was filled with latency, it was a bit of a mess. What's actually there could be very good, but I didn't get to experience that because it wasn't running very well at all. So not one of the worst experiences, but a dishonourable mention because I really wanted it to be great and it wasn't at launch. But I'll keep an eye on it. Oh, I hate this next one, but still, it's not making it to my worst games list because it had some good merits. Watchdogs Legion. Now, Watchdogs Legion is actually quite a good Watchdogs game. It's quite a good open world game. But it made it onto my dishonourable mentions because I couldn't stand the voice acting. I couldn't stand it. And there might be some of you out there listening to me now and thinking, you just sound like a Watch Dogs character with your stupid British voice, and you might be right. But for me, I couldn't listen to it. They sounded like over-exaggerated, chavvy South Londoners, all of them. And yes, some people in the UK speak like that, but not everyone. Almost everyone in that game spoke with that same accent and that same dialect, and they said things like bruv and I don't know any other words. It just pulled me out of the experience. I wanted to enjoy that virtual London and I kept cringing at the vocals and it really put me off. I couldn't engage with the story, I couldn't become emotionally invested because it just annoyed me. And that's not what you want. The other reason why Legion ends up on my dishonourable mentions list is because it had a horrible bug with the saving. You can't manually save in that game. You have to rely on an autosave, and twice the autosave failed, just completely failed to do its job, and I watched my wife lose about 6 hours of gameplay each time. She stayed pretty cool, pretty calm, very impressive, but still that kind of thing shouldn't be happening with big AAA games when they're coming out on brand new consoles. Why no manual save? You have manual save in Assassin's Creed, so why not in Watch Dogs? It just felt strange to me. My last dishonourable mention is Cyberpunk 2077. Now this one is almost entirely on me. It's almost entirely on me. I had very, very high expectations for this game. I was prepared and ready to play this game and not play anything else for weeks. I spoke about it with friends. I said, oh, I'm going to disappear into this game. This is going to be it. I'm going to live in here. It's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And it just wasn't the game I wanted it to be. Where my expectations got twisted, I don't know. Whether it was me watching all the Night City live stream events that they were doing, whether I took from that some information that wasn't really true, it wasn't the game that they were going to sell me, I don't know. But it didn't quite live up to my expectations. It doesn't land itself on the worst experiences of the year for me, because the game itself is actually pretty good. I am enjoying what I'm playing, but it isn't the game I kind of wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a much more immersive open world experience akin to something like GTA or Red Dead Redemption, but it isn't quite that. Now the reason it's on my dishonourable mentions and not on my worst experiences of the year is because that would be unfair. The game is actually very good, the story's very good, but I can't shake the issues, the crashes, the bugs. All the things I've had since launch have really impacted something that I was very, very excited for. I am still playing it. It's the game I'm playing right now. I'm about 35 hours in, and when it works, it really works and it's great. But too often have I been pulled out of that experience by something game-breaking or a crash straight to desktop, or just rough frame rates. It's a shame. I'm sure at some point this game is going to be phenomenal. After a few more patches, it's going to be mind-blowing. But right now, it isn't quite the game I wanted it to be, and a lot of that is on me. For hyping it up too much and getting all caught up in the hype train, I understand that's my fault, but here we are. It's on my dishonourable mentions because I understand and I can see that the game is great, and I am playing it still. But there have been too many bugs, too many issues, too many glitches, and too much of my own expectation that meant at launch it wasn't quite the experience I wanted it to be. And now we dive into the top 5 worst games I've played this year. This is going to be painful. I'll try and make this quick. First up is Crysis Remastered. Crysis Remastered came out and I thought, oh, that would be great. Crysis was kind of the benchmark for FPS games. I'm going to grab that and it's going to be this brand new, amazing looking experience. It's going to push my hardware and I'm going to have a great time. And it doesn't even have an FOV slider. Honestly speaking though, no FOV slider is probably one of the smaller issues with the Crysis remake. In a world where companies like Bluepoint are making absolutely mind-blowing remakes of games like Demon's Souls for the PS5, Shadow of the Colossus for the PS4, and then you've got stuff like Crash Insane Trilogy, Spyro Trilogy, and Tony Hawk, amazing remasters that really bring those old games up to date and into the future. Something like Crysis Remastered is just kind of unacceptable. It didn't look any better than what you can get Crysis running with mods. Like, stick some mods on Crysis and you can make it look better than Crysis Remastered. It didn't feel like a full overhaul. It felt like a cash grab, a way to get some money in their pockets to maybe make a new project. I don't know. It just didn't feel like a revolutionary remake. It didn't even feel like a refresh. It looked a little nicer, but it was the exact same experience. I don't know. I didn't particularly even have high expectations for it, but I thought, hey, this is Crysis. They're going to show it some love. It's going to look brand new. It's going to look shiny, and it didn't. It felt like the same old Crysis, and it was filled with bugs and glitches. I don't know. It should have been better, and it reeked of cash grab to me anyway. In at number 4, Resident Evil Resistance. Not Resident Evil 3. I actually quite liked Resident Evil 3. It wasn't as good as 2. It was a little bit too short, didn't have as much puzzle mechanics as I would have wanted it to, but Resident Evil Resistance was god-awful. I remember when Resident Evil had co-op modes, and they were great for multiplayer. I remember Resident Evil Mercenaries. I used to love playing that. But this attempt at making Resident Evil multiplayer just didn't work for me. It was almost Dead by Daylight, but like a really rough around the edges version that just wasn't fun. It was glitchy. The characters, for me anyway, were sliding in place without kind of any kind of movement. The systems were cumbersome and confusing. It almost immediately had no player base. If they'd just taken the time they spent making Resident Evil Resistance and applied that to Resi 3, I think Resi 3 would have been a far more complete and, for me, rewarding experience. It was just a little bit too short and there were some big things cut out that I really wished were there, but instead they gave us Resistance, which just fell flat for me, wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy trying to unlock anything or work out any of the systems, and the gameplay was just a watered down rip-off of Dead by Daylight, with uninteresting maps and some of the worst characters I've ever seen in a Capcom game. If Capcom want to bring multiplayer back to Resident Evil, then just give us co-op back, because co-op in Resi 5 was amazing and co-op in Resi 6 was probably the only redeeming factor of that game. So that's where the focus should be. Trying to create a Dead by Daylight competitor is probably not going to work at this point. In at number 3, another horror game, Remothered Broken Porcelain. Oh my god, I hated this game. I hated this game so very much. I really enjoyed the original Remothered game. It was a very tense, taut cat and mouse experience in an old creepy mansion with a very wacky story, but I could get behind it and the mechanics were solid. It was a fun time. Remothered Broken Porcelain, however, was just straight up broken. I cannot even sit and list all the things that were wrong with it. That's how bad it was. I somehow managed to get myself through an entire playthrough, but it was painful. The AI didn't work. The enemies would see you through walls. They'd hear you creeping, even though the creeping was pretty much your one defense, your one ability to be able to get behind them and stab them to kind of incapacitate them. They'd hear you wherever you were. They'd find you in boxes if you were hiding in them. It was so broken. I had game-breaking glitches. I needed to jump back and kind of restart huge chunks of progress. I don't know what went wrong with this one. I really don't. Yeah, Remothered Broken Porcelain was just not fun. A broken horror game. I really wanted it to be good, but it sadly wasn't. Unless it's had a few big chunky patches, steer well clear of it. In at number 2 is the X111 remake, or 13 remake. Just another game that was filled to the brim with glitches and bugs, problems that weren't small. At a certain point, I was looking around in one of my levels and all the walls were disappearing. I was just in a vast blue space following some guy. It wasn't supposed to look like that, I promise you. I was supposed to be in a bank vault, but all of the surrounding textures, all of the walls, all of the floors just kept disappearing. It was just not ready for public consumption, and it's a shame because the original is so fun. It's a great spy thriller, first-person shooter, very similar to like GoldenEye and James Bond games. Had a lot of heart, had a lot of emotion, great story. And this one kind of stripped all that out and just plastered over a new visual, but then also made it feel broken. Loads of issues, badly optimized on PC, some really poor key bindings and control options that just did not work. Terrible field of view. Should have been good, it just wasn't. Yeah, unless it's had some big patches, steer clear of the 13 remake, filled with problems. Here we are, the worst game I played this year. Could it really be anything else? Marvel's Avengers. I'm a huge Avengers fan. I'm a massive Marvel nerd, and this game could have been so good. The first few hours of this game are actually quite good. It feels like a solid single-player action-adventure game. It feels a bit like Uncharted or the more recent kind of Tomb Raider games. It felt really good. And then it evolves and turns into the live service mess that they opted to turn that game into, to try and stretch it out over years and years with additional content and extra characters and microtransactions and unlockable costumes. It was just a mess. All the fun evaporated after those first few hours. The missions became bland, the areas became so uninteresting, and I was just hitting spongy enemies as the Hulk for hours to grind out some points to maybe buy a new costume. It just felt like a huge cash grab, and it shouldn't have been. A Marvel's Avengers game in a post-MCU world should be an absolute shoo-in, but it lost something like 64 million, or it must be million, not billion. It lost a lot of money for Square Enix because it's terrible, and people realise that. We don't need everything to be a live service game. They could have given us this game as a really solid multiplayer still. Could have kept his multiplayer but not done live service, or just single player. Could have given us a solid story-driven Avengers game and then added in additional content as the years went on, and we would buy extra characters if they came with their own stories. But the live service part sucked all the fun out of it. It made it spongy, it made it padded, and no one's playing it anymore because it's not very good. I wanted it to be great, it just really wasn't. Games like Spider-Man have proven that you can make a great superhero video game in the modern age, and Marvel's Avengers was not that. It was bad. And there we have it. They are my very best and very worst gaming experiences of 2020. These are all just my own opinion, the things that I've experienced. There's a lot of games I haven't played this year that probably would appear on this list if I had got around to playing them. Hades is a big one. Everyone's always talking about Hades at the moment, and I haven't got around to playing it, but I'm sure it would be on this list if I had played it, not in the bad part, in the good part. If you're enjoying any of the games that I said were bad, that's fantastic. I'm not trying to take away from that. These ones just didn't connect with me. Personally, they didn't tick the boxes for me, but that's the joy of video games. We can all enjoy different ones and hopefully have a civil conversation about the ones we did like and the ones we didn't like, rather than tearing each other to pieces over video games that we might think are better than other ones. And that brings me to the end of 2021. Once again, thank you for all your support this year. It's been absolutely mind-blowing for me, someone who really didn't have huge goals for this channel and has watched it kind of explode far beyond his understanding. It's been absolutely incredible. So thank you for all those who have watched. Hopefully 2021 will eventually become a far better and far more enjoyable year for all of us. I'm sure we'll get there. We just need to stick with the routine for a little bit longer, push on through, and good times are coming again, I'm sure. Just a little bit more tough times before we get there. Hopefully you have a great new year, whatever it is you're doing. I'll see you all very, very soon for more videos. Here's to 2021. Let's make it a better one. Take care, guys.